how did you sort of get started in the sort of realm of business you're in today? Like, what got you there? Because look, I could talk to you about hockey for a good, like, healthy chunk of
Yeah,
time,
yeah,
and like, yeah, like just like I'll pump you for all the information in the world. But
sure.
yeah, how did you sort of like, oh, you know what, businessman, come on.
Well, I'm pretty much on my third career. So the short of that is coming out of Temple, I was journalism degree and I went into the field of marketing, public relations, and I worked for a number of agencies. I was always on the consulting side in and around Philadelphia. And in 2002, I had an intersection point. So for one, I became a single dad at that
Okay.
time, and my son was only 2. So, I needed that flexibility. Diapers and bottles were half of the time back then. And I decided to start my own firm and did that for a few years. And then I got into the world of internships and apprenticeships, which is something that had always been, I had for myself, led to my first job,
Mm,
always ran the programs for employers, always enjoyed going back to the schools, being a guest in the classrooms. And I saw the market need. It was just nothing formalized out there, and developed a whole set of intellectual property and kind of like the wheel of, right? Here you go, employer, everything you need to run a program. All of that is still in place. And we're at about 2005 and the 2007 area now. And I started a nonprofit called the Internship Institute, which has, and again, been my main priority in about the past 15 years ever since. And then last year, I had another inflection point. I had a little bit of bandwidth. My son's off to college.
yeah.
I'm remarried now, and my wife and I have another business. And I was between grants with the nonprofit.
Yeah.
And I was, at this point, it's like, well, what would I regret not doing? I've got,
Okay.
ideally lots of life ahead of me. Here's where I am. And I knew this book was something that I'd always wanted to do, and started just putting my head down. And I wasn't really sure like what I had, like for anybody who wants to write a book,
Mm,
it's just, take 2 days, write it all out. Maybe it's a blog, or maybe it's something more. And so I went for it, and the book came out of all things end of March, right as COVID hit here in the States. So we're now into my third career, right? So at the same time, with COVID hitting, the nonprofit went onto the side burner entirely. All
mm,
internships, all apprenticeships are by the wayside. It's not exactly a thriving industry, but at the same time, and still, of course, not, we're still at our peak. But it was good timing, if that sounds odd to a degree. In writing the book, I really hadn't had an end game. I really didn't think there was much beyond that. Meanwhile, it was this. I just felt the need to write it. I wanted to get it out there. It was difference making. I paid for it out of my pocket. It wasn't some business expense like I'm a coaching business or something. It wasn't meant
mhm.
to be some glorified business card. As odd as it sounds, it's a book that's meant to be read. I want to get it to the masses. And then in terms of leaning in doing interviews like this, like I just love this. There are people on the other side of our microphones hearing this, who we get to impact in a positive way. And continuing in the conversation here, but somewhere along the way, I had one at the end of a podcast, and this host said to me, have you ever thought about starting your own? And I was like, no. It's like, I didn't even think twice. It's just, I didn't really know much about it. And it was within a couple of days, I had a pretty major coincidence that led me to just pursue and get more curious. And then that certainly led me to do it. And I'm sure it'll come up, the book Zisms, the podcast Insights to Live By. And we were talking before the show, right? So I'm now on, coming up on episode 30,
Yeah.
and I'm just having a blast. So as I look at where I am, right, it wasn't just the book. Now it's the podcast, continuing to lean in, continuing to enjoy it. Nonprofit's still on the side burner. I do plan on circling back. That's kind of my life's work to
Mm,
a degree, lots of unfinished business. But now I do have that vision in mind. I am going beyond the podcast. I'm developing the audiobook, the workbook, the workshops, all the things that a content developer in the mindset, personal improvement and life enrichment space would do. And I want to go all the way now. So in a way, it's kind of like my calling found me, if that's fair enough to say. I've just, with the nonprofit, with that business, it's like that feeling of swimming upstream. I don't think I could possibly have tried anything more difficult in going into that space. I have a lot to show for it.
Mm.
Same, apprenticeships by any other name, right? Internship Institute, mostly on the professional side. But this, it really does feel like things are going my way. You do feel like you're swimming with the current. And now I want to keep going.
Yeah,